Maybe auto record. There's a worry. We've already started talking. And we'll need to have a look at that. It seems to suggest there's 13 minutes on the recording already. I'm not sure we want all the stuff that we've talked about broadcast. Give it a couple of minutes. 2 o'clock. I'm going to start at 2:02. Okay, I'm going to start. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. This is early November show and tell. Bonfire night, I seem to remember, although I'm not sure that we're actually allowed to have bonfires anymore. Never mind. So show and tell 22. Quickly take you through some introduction slides. You may have seen these before if you've attended these show and tells before. Gives you a little bit of context of what they're for, and then I'll be handing off to some people to talk about some of the things that we've been doing. What is a show and tell? So at its broadest, it's our way of keeping everyone updated on the project. We want to share what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're working on, and then get any feedback and questions from you guys. Agile and user-centered from the start. The generic principle that we hold is that everything should be based on user needs. So we measure, we learn and share, we build, we measure, we learn and share, and we build again. And it's an iterative circle. So we do lots of small iterations. We don't try and deliver everything at once. What it does mean is it gives us the ability to test, deploy, retest, redeploy, change, iterate, and all those good things that means that we really put the user at the heart of what we're delivering. Our vision, we will give our residents more free time by making everything they do with the council faster and easier. Fantastic vision, and it's really what we're trying to develop when we deliver buckinghamshire.gov.uk. Goals for next year. We talked in the last show and tell about what we've done in the previous year. So I wanted to really think about what we're going to do in the next year. Things that we're doing now, we have these clear content guidelines for services. We'll talk some more about those later. Starting to engage with services to clarify our roadmap and look at governance framework for content areas, so what our content strategy is, that kind of thing. By the end of this year, which is rapidly approaching, prioritizing timed roadmap to accelerate the current rate of migration. We know we've got an awful lot of content to migrate from our old legacy platforms onto our new platform by March 2022, when our old domain names get taken away from us, when there is no longer an Aylesbury Vale dc.gov.uk domain to put anything on. We need to have got all our content off by then. So by September next year, we'll have in-flight migration of all the content from the legacy websites with a view to turning off those legacy websites in March 22. So what have we done in the last 3 weeks? And all our show and tells are based around a 3-week sprint period. So our current work streams are heavily focused on the Family Information Service. So we have Family Information Service local offer content development and user testing findings, and that iteration that we talked about earlier, that revisiting of testing to change things and iterate things. and then roadmap methodology and planning. We'll talk about these in more depth in the next slides. And so with that, I'm going to pass over to David, who is going to take us through the Family Information Service and local offer content development. David.
Thanks, Pete. So if we could have the first slide, please. For the last couple of months, I've been working with the Family Information Service to prepare for the migration of local offer for SEND content from the current FIS site to its new Bucks microsite. For those who aren't familiar with the local offer for SEND, I think it's fair to say that it's a bit of a beast. The reasons for saying this are, there's currently a high volume of complex information, which is overwhelming for core users, who are parents, carers, and young people with SEND. There's lots of information on the site that's outdated, and this needs to be reconsidered and rewritten in a straightforward, user-led style. Also, there's currently lots of information for teachers and other professionals that needs to be separated for the content for parents and carers, and where appropriate, be moved to Schools Web. Next slide, please. To begin taming the monster, in September, the integrated SEND service at Bucks kindly spent a lot of time creating a document which identified content owners for the lion's share of pages in the local offer. This was a tremendous help, especially as I'm an outsider and don't always know the best people to speak to in the council about particular topics. But like all the best laid plans, it presented its own problems. The first issue was there was lots of, in many cases, dozens of subject matter experts to contact across the council, which made progress slow as we had to schedule time for meetings and work around availability and annual leave. It also became a challenge to keep track of the discussions we had with multiple stakeholders, which became a tangled web of emails, Trello cards, and Google Docs. And aside from all this, the production of local offer content is also unique, as FIS have a duty to take a co-production approach to content, which means involving parents, carers, professionals, and children and young people with SEND. This was a challenge as we first needed to create content to share with members of the public, but there was no guarantee that they'd agree with our approach. Next slide, please. Over the last fortnight, we've experimented with a different approach to local offer content, and now have a new strategy that promises to speed the creation of pages for the FIS microsite. The process is pretty straightforward. Rather than collaborating with multiple subject matter experts to work out what is required from local offer pages, and using this process to determine a structure for the content, we prepared simple information architecture for the education section based on our research. For the education section, we created this skeleton structure by looking at every page, every download, and every link in the existing content, and identifying what content was for core users, what was for professionals, and what could be relocated to Schools Web. All this research was recorded in an expansive Google Sheet, which can be shared with stakeholders for clarity on how we arrived at the skeleton IA. This approach gives us a foundation to build on. There are, without mistakes, and important pieces of information missing, but by collaborating with subject matter experts, we can fill in the blanks and quickly move towards an IA that works for both Bucks and its users. During this research phase, I also created some sample pages in Wagtail to demonstrate how we'd like to present the content in a direct, user-focused style. Next slide, please. With these materials in hand, the next stage was to set up a content session with participants from the key stakeholders to get everybody together at the same time. And in the case of the local offer education content, that was the Family Information Service, the integrated SEND service, and Fact Bucks, who are a group of parents and professionals who meet to discuss real issues that affect children and young people with additional needs in the local area. In this session, our discussion was guided by the flow diagram, which you can see in this slide. Although it's old-fashioned, I found that using a simple flow diagram, where content is broken down into branches, is a good way to express how we think information should be presented and navigated. These diagrams are particularly useful as they can be understood by stakeholders from a wide variety of different backgrounds. I'm pleased to say that the meeting for the education section was a success. Everybody involved had an opportunity to comment on the structure and make recommendations for improvements. This allowed me to revise the IA. This revised flow diagram now doubles as a content plan, where I'm able to tick off pages as I draft them. These pages can then be shared with subject matter experts. Sign off. Next slide, please. In the days following the content session, I was able to prepare first drafts of over half the education pages, the most content I've been able to work on for weeks, and submit these pages to a small number of subject matter experts for feedback. This week, I've taken the same approach to other areas of the local offer and prepared simple content plans to develop with relevant stakeholders. FIS have been a tremendous help in assisting me to identify and contact the people who should attend these content sessions. I'm hopeful that in the coming days and weeks, I'll be able to collaborate with stakeholders to get a green light on all the content we need for the migration of the entire local offer. Next slide, please. I also want to take this opportunity to give you an update on the usability testing we introduced in the last show and tell, where we tested user journeys to find how people navigated between pages on the Bucks main site and upcoming FIS microsite. Next slide, please. Following her sterling efforts in managing and running the testing sessions, Sarah did a lot of work analysing the responses and summarising the findings. I will paste a link to Sarah's report into the chat when I finish yabbering, but some of the key findings were: the overall reaction from users was positive, with a satisfaction rate of 5.4 out of 7. Most of the tasks we assigned to participants were completed successfully, meaning that our prototype pages were effective. Feedback from participants highlighted the fact that we needed to do more work on search and make it easy for users to understand the difference between the main site search and a directory search. And the feedback also highlighted that we could do some work to improve the user experience by tweaking the design and wording. Next slide, please. Based on the findings, we worked on new iterations of the FIS homepage and subpage templates. Some of the key changes we made were only having one search bar visible on the screen at any one time, so that users did not use the wrong search for the wrong task. We also changed the photos on the homepage and subpage. Many users commented that the content did not make immediate sense to them, as they could not see pictures of children with SEND or teenagers in content focused on the needs of young people. So Sarah worked closely with FIS to select and change the pictures to better reflect the audience. Next slide, please. We also revised some of the language to spell out special educational needs and disabilities for those unfamiliar with the term SEND, and added additional text to banners to help put the directory in context for those who did not understand what it offers. We also provided more contextual links to the directory, where users get results where specific search terms are pre-populated. I think the templates we have now are a huge improvement in what we had before the testing session, and huge kudos has to go to Sarah for turning this around so quickly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. It's great. Some great work there going on in the information service. To talk about our content migration strategy and the kind of methodology and planning behind it, I'd like to pass over to Sarah now. I would say that this is first iteration of this. We may come back and revisit, but some really great work going on here. So, Sarah.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, David. So content migration. So when we think about content migration, it can be scary because it's a very big piece of work. So the best way to actually approach it is to actually build a roadmap. And a roadmap is essentially a high-level planning document, which is not only reflecting the goals that we want to achieve per type of service we would like to tackle, but also within this display, what we want to see is basically the different tasks for us to actually achieve and reach this objective. So it's very high level, and for that, what we had to think about is to understand or maybe clarify a way to actually prioritize the roadmap. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. So what we decided to do was to put on the table literally, what we wanted to prioritize. So the first one, which you can see at the top, is obviously legal and regulatory requirements, simply because we can't avoid it. We have to obviously do it. Having said that, it does not refer to a specific service. It's going to be niche in different places. So it is obviously there. We need to always consider it, no matter what we do. It has to be there. But obviously it doesn't give us a hint about what we need to tackle. So we move to the second part, second priority, which is wider service improvement roadmap. And this is once again about all the big work stream, let's say. And then within those work stream, there are many different projects. So unfortunately, it doesn't give us a hint yet on what we need to tackle. So we moved on then to the third priority, which is analytics. And then we decided to actually follow our idea about having a user-centered approach and based our decisions on what we need to tackle on analytics, which are reflecting basically user needs, but also user expectations. If you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So there are many ways to approach it, and what we decided to do, so we talked about it, we had some different thought about what kind of data we should actually consider, and we tried to actually go for from something relatively complex to something relatively simple to implement it as a methodology. So the first criteria that we are considering is the popularity of the pages, simply because more interest that we have, for example, for a certain category, whatever is this category, obviously we know that we are going to respond to user needs and expectation. The second criteria we looked at is the usefulness of those pages. So on the Bucks website at the moment, anywhere you are, you can always say whether or not a page is actually useful or no. And then the last one, which is maybe not obvious to understand at first sight, is, well, I'll explain, page X to contact us. So it's very simple. Wherever you are on the website, you can always scroll down and go to the footer and click on Contact Us. So what is great about the data that we have is that we can actually identify where a user is before clicking on the Contact Us. So by combining those three different categories, we decided to actually focus and work on this prioritization. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So it's very colorful, but it's I know it's not very pretty, sorry about that. It's very useful, very practical. So what you can see on the left-hand side of this table in pink is basically the popularity of the pages. The more popular, the pinkier it is, and so we go down this way. Then the second data we looked at, as I was explaining, is the usefulness of those pages. So how they have been the users. The way I organized the colors this time was by a group of 5. So the darker, we start from a dark red, where people really think it's not useful at all, to light red, and then orange, and then we go yellow, and then finally green, where people say, yes, it is useful. It's basically reflected here, by a group of 5. And then we move on to the last one, which I think is interesting, is where do they come from when they actually click on Contact Us? So the beauty of this table, even though it's not very pretty, the beauty of this table is to understand when do people actually find a page which is perhaps not that useful and just give up. On the contrary, they really need an answer to their questions and decide to actually take the initiative to contact us. So looking like that, it's very difficult to still define on what we want to tackle. So if you can move to the next slide, please, Pete. Thank you. So what we did is reorganizing and grouping. So what you can see on the right-hand side, the roadmap priority, we decided to group it per level on what is it we want to tackle, what is it which needs to be on the roadmap and to be considered as a priority. So what you can see at the top is level 1, which means it is very important for us to tackle. It's something we absolutely want to have in our roadmap, is the bin collection, recycling and waste, but also the planning and building control. Those ones, as you can see at the top, are not considered useful pages at the moment, but then as you can see under the third column, people still need an answer for it. And this is something that you see for all of these categories. Level 2, schools and learning, care adults as well. Then level 3, we've got the council tax, housing and benefits. And then the last one is parking, roads, transport, and then finally environment. And I think this is just about it for me. So thank you very much. I hope it makes sense. I'll pass over to Pete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. There's some interesting findings coming out of that. And as I say, some of it tied to service improvement work, some of it not so much. But the methodology that we're using, we will hope to roll out across the whole of the creation of our roadmap over the next few months. So where do we go from here? So we have a live Trello board for those people interested in seeing what we're doing, what we're working on. That board is being worked all the time. It's been a little bit slow this month, it has to be said, but that's probably my fault. But it will be revisited, and you can go there and track what particular issues and what we're working on is happening at the time. So next steps, continuation of the FIS microsite with working on the content, but also building that roadmap out so that we have greater clarity and greater engagement with services to say these are the things that we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks, 3 months. Well, not say 3 years because it's not going on for 3 years, but over the next kind of 18 months, that we can have that totally prioritized roadmap to get us to the point where we've migrated all our content by April 22. Next show and tell, 3 weeks today, 26th of November. Anybody got any questions they would like to either pipe up or put in the chat? Nope. If nobody has any questions, then I will give you some time back and say thank you very much to everybody for your time today. Say next one in 3 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Colin, do you just want to really touch base so that you've got